Hi, in this video we'll be exploring interest. So you may be wondering, what exactly is interest? So let's say you go to the bank and you borrow some money, or you go to a friend and you borrow some money, or an enemy and you borrow some money. Well, the extra amount that you have to pay back, so let's say if you borrowed $10 but you have to pay 11 back, that extra $1 is called interest. Now, it works the other way as well. Let's say you go to the bank and you put money in. That's called investing money. So let's say you invest some money. So the amount that that money grows by, so if you invest money today and in 2 years, you have more money, that more money is called interest as well. All right, so there are two types of interest that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at simple interest and compound interest. But in this video, we'll be focusing on simple interest. Simple interest is the interest earned as a percentage of the original amount that was deposited, invested, or borrowed. So let's say you put in $100 into the bank. The interest will always be calculated based on that original amount, that original $100. So let's think about it this way. First of all, let's define some variables here. Interest, we're going to use the letter I. I for interest, which kind of makes more sense than R. The original amount that you put into the bank is actually called, not the original, but it's called the principal. And we're going to label that P, which makes sense. Now the interest rate, we'll talk about that for a second. The interest rate is the percentage, I'll write that down below so we remember what that is. It's the percentage, but converted to a decimal. Per year. So that's the interest, that's the percentage of the money that you will be calculating the interest for per year. That sounds a little bit confusing, but you will see what I mean in just a second. And we use, you guessed it, the letter R, and time. And we're going to be doing everything annually, so this is time per year, or number of years, sorry, and we're going to use the letter T. Okay, so in order to figure out the interest in an account, you want to figure out what the percentage is of the original amount. So in order to figure out the percent of a number, as you know, you multiply to figure out, let's say this were 10%, and we want to figure out the 10% of the original amount, you'd multiply these two numbers, 10% of the principal, for example. So in order to figure out percentage of a number, you multiply those numbers. But it's happening for many years. You want to figure out how much money you're earning over multiple years. So after you figure out how much money you're earning for 1 year, then you can multiply it by the number of years. So I'm just showing you how this formula that we're about to write down was derived. However, in the future, you can just feel free to use it. PRT, that's supposed to be a P. Let's fix that. Okay, PRT. So the interest that you earn over time will be equal to PRT. Principal, again, remember that's the original amount. Remember that interest is that extra money earned. And the percentage rate, we already know what that is because I have that note there. All right, let's use it. It will become so much clearer when we use it. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so here's a nice, quick, simple question. We put $15,000 in a bond, and it earns 4% simple interest. And so that's 4% simple interest, I should say, per year. Another way of saying per year is per annum, or PA. So it earns 4% interest per year. Find the interest earned after 2 years. So in order to do this, we have our formula I, which is interest, equals PRT. So our interest is going to be the principal amount, that's the original amount of $15,000, multiplied by R, which is that percentage, but converted to a decimal. So 0.04, we move the decimal places 2 places to the left. The decimal points are 2 places to the left, 1, 2, to get 0.04. And time, 2 years. So you want to make sure that time is in years because our interest is in years. You want to make sure that our interest percent rate and our time is in the same type of timing. Okay, so they're both in years. So when you multiply these two numbers, you get that interest is equal to $120. All right, let's turn the page and do one that's slightly more challenging. Okay, so in this question, I did a few things to kind of try to trick you, but we'll go through all these things, and hopefully that helps you to not be tricked by these things in the future. All right, so for example, remember what I said before about everything has to be on the same measure of time. So our measure of time here, we're going to use years. That's what we use, especially because we see that this is an annual interest rate. And so we want everything in years. So this months thing, that's the first thing that we have to get fixed. 9 months. How many years is 9 months? So you can do that using ratios, or you can know that, okay, there are 12 months in a year. So 9 is really 9 over 12 months. So time is actually equal to, when you divide 9 by 12, you get 0.75 years. All right, you could do it that way. You could set up a ratio and solve it. There are multiple ways that you could do that, but we're not dealing with 9 months. We are, but we're not really dealing with it as 9 months. We're dealing with it as 0.75 years. All right, good. Now, they're giving us the ending balance, but in our formula, we know that I equals PRT. Our formula tells us nothing at all about ending balance. But remember this. Remember the example I gave you? So a little side note. If you start off with $100 and you end up with 110, your interest was plus 10, right? So the interest is the extra you earn, but the final balance is what you end up with. So now that you remember that, how interest works, now that you remember how interest works, remember that the final balance is always going to be the original amount plus the interest. So in this question, we have the final balance. We can figure out what the interest is because we also have the original amount. So if the final balance is 14, let me actually write that in a way that is easier for you to see. Okay. So final balance. So if our final balance is 1421 and our original amount is 1400, then we can definitely figure out what the interest is. So the interest is, you have to just solve for interest, which is kind of easy in this particular case. And so the interest, that extra amount, the amount that the account grew, is $21. Now I made it look like a crazy formula, a crazy thing. It's actually not. If you think about it, just looking at the original question here, you put 1400 in, you end up with 1421. That is just 21 extra. All right, so now we know what the interest is. Finally, the last thing I did to trick you here is I'm not asking you for the interest. You have to back solve in order to figure out what I'm asking for. And what am I asking for? In this question, I'm asking for the annual interest rate. So that is the question. What is the annual interest rate? So now we can go ahead and plug things in and start to figure out what we need. All right, so our interest is $21. Our principal is our starting amount, which is 1400. Our annual interest rate, we don't know, so we'll put R there. And the time, not 9 months, which it is, but we want it in years, so we put 0.75. All right, we can go ahead and rearrange this, multiply these two things by each other. We get that 21 is equal to 1050 times r. So we can isolate the r by dividing 1050, and we get that r is equal to 0.02. Now that's r in our formula, but that's not our percent interest rate. We could actually leave the formula, the answer like this, because they didn't ask for the percent interest rate. But most questions require, or most times you see the interest rate, it's given as a percent. So if you want to change that to a percent, we can go ahead and move that decimal point back over 2 spots to the right, and we get that the annual percent interest rate is 2. All right, 2% annual interest rate. All right, and that's it.